Welcome to the Lois Banks Show. I'm your host, Lois Banks. Today we have Tenisio, Nima, and Tenisio, thank you so much for coming to the Lois Banks Show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Now, I am so excited that you're here. My mother told me that you actually wanted to come to the hotel just to meet me so that we can talk one-on-one.
Indeed.
And then once my mother explained to me the information that you hold, I actually said, okay, no, Mom, we have to have him, be a guest on the show. For all those who don't know, I'm a licensed nurse in the state of Michigan, and health is near and dear to my heart, and I have a heart to just share a lot of health information with the community and the world. And my goodness, you are just filled with so much information. First, I want to find out, how did you get interested in learning about nutrition and how nutrition heals the body?
Well, I could say it probably started, I would say maybe early 90s, possibly even late 80s. Why I say that is that me being a child of the hip-hop generation, if you will, unbeknownst to many people, hip-hop culture via rap music was expressing a lot of information about being healthy through its songs. You have groups like A Tribe Called Quest, who made a song called Ham and Eggs. It was talking about, I don't eat ham and eggs because it's high in cholesterol.
Okay.
You had artists like KRS-One who made a song called Beef, where at that time the beef industry was actually coming under a lot of scrutiny. And he made a song to basically denounce eating beef at that time, and he was promoting vegetarianism. And last but not least, the Nation of Islam was actually promoted a lot through a lot of hip-hop artists, and so their thoughts are, eating things such as pork were not very healthy.
Right.
So I'm taking in a lot of this information as a child, really not putting it to use yet, but as I got older and certain things started to just resonate with me as a young adult, I finally, kind of took the leap and began to just correct, the ways that I was living via what I put into my mouth, how I took care of my body, exercise, all of that good stuff.
So you're saying as a young child, you were aware of the different messages coming from different angles as far as how to take care of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I would, of course, be remiss not to give credit to my own, parents for being ones that weren't very concerned with what television was telling you was fashionable for a child to eat. My mother was very much a promoter of, rice cakes and honey, just stuff that I probably was like, at the time, not excited to eat. But as I have gotten older and, had my own family and really just look at, again, the path that built up, I realized there were those subliminal messages, if you will, that began to sink in more and more and resonate with me as I got older. So,
okay, wonderful. Now, you and I had a very, very interesting dialogue, and you opened up your heart and you talked about the importance of eating clean foods without the use of chemicals and pesticides, and how it can heal AIDS. Will you open up your heart and share that story with me again?
Of course. And I would want to make sure the listeners even know it goes beyond just AIDS, but obviously we know that's one of the most striking epidemics in this moment in time. And so I would just say, as a testament to the power of the Most High, it's been said, we'll say millennia now, from the days of the world's first super genius. They call him Imhotep. But when the Greeks came to Egypt, Imhotep being an Egyptian, they changed his name to Hippocrates. So now people have what they call the Hippocratic Oath. Now this is science, again, that was being promoted, like I said, thousands of years ago, which says, let your food be your medicine, and your medicine be your food. And so you have a lot of healers. I'm careful not to use the word doctors, because these individuals actually are not medical doctors. But you have a lot of healers around the world, and especially here in the Western Hemisphere, that are trying to get back, if you will, to just those original sciences, that God provided us with, which is literally grow the herbs and grow the food in order to sustain yourself. One of those gentlemen who's most notable is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sebi. Dr. Sebi, in his 20s, was prescribed with high blood pressure, with impotency, and several other diseases that he was able to cure himself from. And how did he do it? He went back to the earth. He actually began to learn some of the sciences that many holistic healers in Africa were using with herbs and also with superfoods. And so he began to take the things that he used to heal himself and now promote them to the community. Okay. And in 1984, he was actually advertising in the New York Amsterdam News that he had cured AIDS and leukemia and cancer. Right. And of course, the powers that be didn't like that. They said, you're practicing malpractice. Right. And they locked him up. Right. When he took his case to court in 1987, they asked him to be able to bring, I believe if I'm correct, 5 people that could state and show the medical records from his work that they were cured of AIDS. Over 70 showed up. Wow. And as a result, he was actually let go in 1987, and you can still actually Google that article right now to this day. Okay. So I would encourage your listeners to look up the New York Amsterdam News' article about Dr. Sebi and his court case with the New York State Supreme Court. Yes, yes. So, now, you know, I had a conversation with you prior to this interview, and I stated to you that, you know, I've actually seen diseases leave the human body when people consume the foods the way that God grew them without the use of chemicals and pesticides. I usually tell people, as soon as you put the clean foods in, you're going to start seeing mucus come out your lungs, your urine, your bowel. That's right. The pain will begin to leave because you're flushing. It's a cleanse. It's an internal cleanse. Talk a little bit about the importance of keeping the body clean and not having toxic poisons build up inside the body. Right. It's interesting. Most people who, let's say, are car enthusiasts, know more about the anatomy of their vehicle than they do the anatomy of their body. So, you know you can't pour sand into the gas tank of a vehicle and expect it to run. You know you can't let it go past 3,000 miles, you know, without an oil change, or it's going to break down eventually. The body works exactly the same way. And so oftentimes people, again, don't realize the simplicity of just flushing, cleansing, and then maintaining a steady diet, you know, or what some people even say is live it, you know, because again, we even, just the terminologies we use, diet, it's like you're promoting death, in essence, just in the etymology of the word. Yes. But to get back to point, ultimately, and I'm glad you mentioned it, the mucus, okay, because that actually ties very much into the works that Dr. Sebi was doing, because he'll state to you that there was only one disease, and it's the presence of mucus. Where that mucus begins to attach itself to the body, and the effect of that relationship is what creates, you know, high blood pressure, or what creates a tumor. But it's the mucus itself that is actually the culprit that healers will focus on trying to eject out of the body. Okay. Now, what would be the number one way to do that outside of just the herbs and the food that you eat? Is water. Yes. And you have so many people right now who are walking around dehydrated, and they don't even realize it, to where their point, their belly keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Nothing is flushing it out. Exactly. Okay? And as a result of that, when you have sustenance that's been in your body from days to weeks to months to even years for many people, you have so many different type of you know, detriments that can happen, worms inside of the body, you know, all the things that we all hear about and the statistics that we hear. But very simple methods of drinking water, enough of it, eating foods at the appropriate time of day, you know, meaning, for example, fruits are really your foods that break down, and then your vegetables, if you will, are the foods that build up. So you want to eat your fruits and your vegetables at different times a day. If you are a consumer of meat, I mean, be at least educated on where your meat is coming from. Exactly. You know, and just be clear on the fact that the body is just as important as that, you know, Chevy Malibu, you know, rims that we concern ourselves so much about. But we don't even know, if you ask somebody to point to where your liver is at, they can't tell you which side of the body it's on. You know, that's something that I think we really need to kind of correct. Yeah. So. Well, you know, I can remember my family and I doing a liver flush, a kidney flush, a gallbladder flush, and every time we went inside the body to flush it out, we saw something come out of the body. Right. Talk about the maintenance of internal cleansing and the importance of flushing out. Yeah. On a regular, you know. You got to do it regularly. That's right. Yeah, I mean, again, I love this conversation because it can just, there's so many metaphors for these things. So here we are, we're in springtime, you know, in this part of the world. I mean, if the planet is doing its cleansing and doing its modification, shouldn't we? Yes. You know, especially when the things that we consume from the planet are organically already within our body.
Yes.
You know, we have gold, we have copper, we have magnesium, and all these minerals. And to help the listeners begin to focus on that, there's roughly 102 minerals that you need. So you want to be able to provide a place for those minerals to thrive. And again, if you're filled all up, you know, just think, again, the body's got to break through to get to what it really needs.
Right.
And instead of getting to those things, oftentimes it has to get to the bad stuff first. So you want to move all of that out of the way, right, so that the good things have a free environment to travel in. And that's what you're really referring to as these cleanses. You know, when you've been building up your body in a wintertime environment, okay, with very fibrous foods, or I shouldn't say fibrous foods, but heavier foods, if you will, your root vegetables. Okay, and now I'm speaking about seasonal eating here. Yeah. You know, items that are really designed to keep the body insulated and warm. When the spring comes, the body wants to free up, okay, and get a lot of that stuff out because it's a lighter time of season, going into the spring, going into the summer. Yeah. So these adjustments have to be made on a regular basis in order for the body to maintain itself in its normal state. Yeah. Now, yes, people say all the time, oh, my grandmother ate pork till she was, you know, 102 or whatnot. Again, I challenge people to maybe look at her lifestyle, though, more than just what she ate. Because like you say, Big Mama gave you all of those flushes. She gave you the cod liver oil and stuff that may have tasted nasty. But you knew that, okay, what I just saw come out of me, I probably wanted up out of me. And most of it was nothing but just byproducts from the food. You know, so those flushes and those cleanses and those fasts, okay, that the Bible speaks of, are not just things to do just for a spiritual experience. They are very much tangible just to your basic temple. How are you going to be a servant of the Most High if you can't get up out of bed? You know, who you going to go serve? So you got to be able to allow this temple to be able to move and function. The brain has to be able to function. If it's dehydrated, it doesn't have enough water, it's not flushed of chemicals, you're not going to be able to think properly.
Speaking of the brain, you know? I see that your hair is in a natural state. Can you talk a little bit about the effects of perms on the hair, or any type of chemical on the hair? Can you, elaborate about that?
Yeah,
the importance of keeping your hair as close to the way as God created it as possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, another metaphor. So, I mean, if the Most High wanted your hair to look a certain way, it would have been designed that way. And then oftentimes, I'm glad you bring up this subject, because when women in particular have asked me about, growing your hair natural, first thing I ask them is, okay, are you a believer in God? Yes. I haven't had one that said no yet. And I'd be like, well, name one mistake God has made? And of course, I just sit there and let that hang for a little bit. Nothing ever comes out that would say otherwise. So the thing that I always just like to emphasize to people is, again, you have a freedom of choice, you have a freedom of expression. Never stop being who you want to be, but just understand that, again, who you are on the outside is also who you're going to be on the inside as well, too. I mean, again, in a physical realm. And those chemicals that are being put on, our bodies and our head, I mean, I beg people to research what these things even are. I mean, if you could take, for example, like a Coca-Cola and pour it on a battery acid, on a car that has like a battery and it eats up that acid. Some of those same chemicals are what you're putting in your head. Your scalp has pores, obviously, because something's coming right up out of them. And it's also going to go back in. And it's just important for people to, again, take note of, okay, how did we even get to this point? Because I think that's important to look at, too. Not just that we are here. But we weren't always putting these things on our bodies, in our bodies, on our heads. How did we get to this point? And I would say a great film, if it's okay to at least acknowledge one, and it's very simple film and very creative, was Chris Rock's film, what was it, Good Hair?
Yes, I saw that.
He showed you right there in the laboratory where they put a tin can, in a little vessel, poured a perm on it, and it ate it up. And ate it up very quickly, clearly, because he had enough time to film it from beginning to end. And yet, these are the same chemicals that people are putting on their bodies. I would just say that if somebody wants to, again, be able to manipulate the body and shape and express themselves, just find healthy ways to do it. There's nothing wrong with expressing beauty and expressing who you are, but you don't want to kill yourself in the process either. What honor, again, is that to the divine? When you were created in its perfection.
Talk a little bit about bottom feeders and how they poison the blood.
And when you say bottom feeders, you mean Like
anything,
fish, or what are you referring to?
I'm talking about anything that God created to, to cleanse the earth.
Okay,
Catfish,
gotcha.
Shrimp.
Right.
And how, it might taste good, but it can also poison the blood. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because, or I want you to elaborate, is because I remember working with a diabetic patient. And I had 2 sets of food. I had a clean plate of food, no chemicals, no bottom feeders, all organic.
Yeah.
And then another set of food that was just had poison and chemicals and just everything was just bad. And I noticed how sensitive the blood was when I checked the blood for the insulin, for the blood sugar levels.
Right.
When the person ate the bad foods that were poison, the blood sugar spiked so quick. But when they ate the foods that were clean, the blood went right back down to normal and stayed normal longer, to the point where the patient was able to come off the insulin.
Exactly.
So I noticed that the blood is real sensitive when it's being poisoned.
Of course.
So talk a little bit about foods to stay away from that's just not good for the blood. It might taste good, but they're really bottom feeders.
Gotcha. If I could, I'll put that answer maybe into a scientific perspective and into a historical, cultural context. So from the scientific end, you're speaking of pH balance, right?
Yes.
This term that people hear about all the time, but they really haven't asked what does that mean, especially when it's typically applicable only to hair care products, as we were talking about. But the pH balance is just the balance in simple terms between the acidity of your body and the electricity of your body, or what the scientific term is known as is alkaline, or alkalinity. So when you're taking those type of foods that you're speaking of, bottom feeders or anything else, again, that's a detriment, you're creating an acidic environment. If you do that same test on the mucus that you did on that blood, you'll find that it's very high in acid. As a result, it's breaking down, it's eating, it's doing what it's designed to do. It's a bottom feeder, right? Or it's the emotion or the byproduct of that bottom feeder that you ate. Now, again, so I asked the question before, let's maybe dig into it. How did we get to this point? Because when you look at specifically people who grew up in indigenous environments, whether they were our native ancestors here in the West, or whether they were African ancestors that were brought over here, we were very much stripped of our opportunities to live ways that we used to live, and forced to live ways that we weren't accustomed to. And we also began to develop aspirations to be like the individuals, or let's just say the movement, if you will, at the time, that was forcing us into those conditions. So why do I say that? The type of foods that we're eating now in these soul food restaurants are what some would term as the slave diet, because these were foods that was all you were allowed to eat if you were living on a plantation or you were in a captive state. It wasn't anything fashionable about eating the guts of a pig. I mean, let's be serious. But that's what we were forced to have to eat. But now, when trying to break free from that condition and eat what someone else was eating, then we also began to adopt lifestyles that weren't actually indigenously connected to us, So now, if I live in a colder environment, or if I'm coming from the Caucasus Mountains of Russia, or if I'm coming from France, there's certain foods that I have to eat to maintain myself under those conditions. Think of a Kodiak bear versus a polar bear. They're both in the same species, but one lives in one environment that's totally different than the other. Thus, they have to live a different way. So one of the brilliances of people specifically who were brought over here, though, from Africa, is how we still knew how to maintain a connection to our history and our culture, our practices. So often these hairstyles that you see women wearing, cornrows and different braids like that, that was one of the ways that we snuck some of our food over here. It was actually food we used to have. The okra plant is an indigenous African plant. Watermelons are an indigenous African plant. How did we get them over here? The women would actually hide the seeds inside of their cornrows. And then that plant would now be brought over here. And a book that talks about that is Ivan Van Sertima's They Came Before Columbus, which shows you that, again, there's lifestyles that they can trace from an anthropological stance that you see happen thousands of miles away on different parts of the earth. And yet when people talk about, Columbus being the first to be brought over here, they don't talk about, well, but who was here when when he got here, excuse me. And what practices did we see a correlation between those people who are already here and the slaves that were brought over?
Right.
People aren't realizing that that exchange was already taking place. And as a result, we adopted lifestyles that are now creating these poisonous environments that we have in our body. That has to be talked about. Because otherwise we'll then begin to gravitate towards another system of doing things that's very young, i.e. the food pyramid and the 4 basic food groups. Those type of eating habits, again, this is just my opinion, but they're not very indigenous to the way that, are very applicable to the way that people of color specifically eat. But if you don't know your history, then you just roll with it and you go along with it and you say, oh, an herbalist is a witch doctor. But Big Mama was a herbalist too, right?
Right. Right. So I'm just so grateful for the information that you're sharing today on the Lois Banks show. Now I know you work with Rashid.
Yeah, Rashid Noor.
Who is an organic farmer here in Atlanta, Georgia. Do you mind giving that information where people can get in contact with Rashid and learn? They can start learning how to take better care of their body and speak with you as well.
Indeed, they could visit www.trulylivingwell.com. We are a naturally grown organization that grows food naturally. We even like to get away from the term organic, and again, it's applicable to what I just said. That term is actually patented and owned by the USDA.
Okay.
If I were to be selling more, if I had sold $4,999 worth of produce at my farmer's market, I could legally say it's organic without putting a logo on there.
Okay.
If I sell $5,001 worth of produce, I can be thrown in prison for using the term organic.
Gotcha.
So the term that is really fashionable amongst farmers is naturally grown.
Naturally grown, I like that even better.
Because that's even better than organic, because organic has loopholes in it too. If you have a drought like we've been having in the Midwest, and you've got to revert back to conventional growing practices, you can actually still label your food organic even though it'll have small traces of pesticide on it.
Gotcha.
So that's just a little bit of
additional information.
And that's what we do.
And we're basically talking about foods grown without the use.
Without pesticides, without chemicals in the soil.
That's what we're talking about.
Primarily with compost, which is just literally your old food scraps, non-meat based, that break down and become soil. Again, the earth you walk on is nothing but these leaves from these trees and the wood and the animals that have died that's been decomposed. The dirt is dead material, but it's alive. So it actually is what we emulate. We try to take the same things that the earth does, and we just emulate it. So people can learn more at that website. For those that actually are viewing that are fortunate enough to be here in Atlanta, we're located off of Hilliard Street, right across from the King Center. So even if you come and visit here, we're growing food on roughly 8 acres of land downtown. And this is the most amazing part. The church that owns the property is Wheat Street Baptist Church, which was pretty much spearheaded by Williams Holmes Border. And Dr. King Sr. used to, I want to say preach at Ebenezer, but then Dr. King Jr. would go listen to William Holmes Borders preach at Wheat Street. Wheat Street owns that property, and you could say William Holmes Borders was like the mayor of Auburn Avenue during its heyday. So he erected housing projects for people of color in the community to have somewhere affordable to live. When they tore that down, we built 8 acres of farmland on top of concrete. So it's not even in dirt. We've actually been able to show people techniques to where they can raise fish in a downtown setting. So we're getting ready to open up an aquaponic system where tilapia and other type of fish will be raised, and you can get it downtown. These are amazing things. And it's a true testament to what we're doing, because just 1 month ago, I was coming back from one of our market deliveries on a Sunday and showed up at the farm. And lo and behold, I saw a wild turkey that was walking around on the property. And we have no idea where it came from. But we've created that type of ecosystem in that environment to where even nature is beginning to take notice, and it's coming back. So again, www.trulylivingwell.com. You can see our market sites, learn more about us. And I'd be remiss, because you're from Motown, I got to shout out Malik Yakini. Y'all need to check out what he's doing right there in Detroit. This brother is actually taking it all the way up to the policy level, to where on a municipal level, he's getting the city to begin to recognize the importance of zoning certain areas.
Yes.
Because right now, urban growing is technically unlawful. So it's not illegal, but what that means is that there's no laws to support it or laws to go against it.
Okay.
So if you were a neighbor next to me and you saw that compost pile and maybe just one day, you know, you just felt like that was an eyesore, you could call the city on me and they could actually come and shut down my operation because it's unlawful.
Right.
So people like Malik are working on the policy level to put the policies in to say, no, you're protected.
Right.
You're allowed to grow that food. And even further, we as a city will support you in doing it.
Yes.
We'll endorse your activities. We'll give maybe a tax break to the owner of that property that's been sitting vacant so that you can come in and grow some food on his property. So shouts out to Malik.
Beautiful, beautiful. I just want to thank you so much for coming on the Lois Banks show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
You were such a blessing. I'm definitely going to have you come back again. And God bless you. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Yes, God bless you.
That's it. Thank you for coming to the Lois Banks show.